Hello and welcome to this edition of One-on-One Sports Webcast. I'm Eric DeStefano.
And I'm Rajat Agarwal. We have a lot for you today, so let's kick things off with the quick hitters.
The Grambling State football team is currently on strike, and last Saturday the team had to forfeit its game against Jackson State. Rajat, what do you make of this, and who is to blame?
This is awful because these
Agreed.
players are at college on scholarship. Grambling State has paid their tuition, has paid for a lot of things for them, and they aren't going to play? How's that
Right.
fair at all to the coaches, to the administration, to the fans? I don't like it at all.
I think the administration is to blame here. I was reading, and it was horrible. The condition of their gym, there's insulation that can be seen. It's showing through, and their gym is in horrible condition. Their uniforms weren't being washed.
But there's better ways to approach the situation.
It's horrible.
But there's
It's
better
horrible.
ways to approach it than to just not show up on the field. You know,
But
I mean, they could go talk to someone about it.
As an institution, Grambling State needs to provide a good football facility for their team. If they don't do that, it shows that the administration doesn't care about its football team. So then why should the players care about playing for the university?
Yeah, but the players need to understand that they are there to play football.
They are.
And some of the resources might not be there.
None of the resources are there.
And the school has to do something about that, yes. But they need to go talk to someone. They can't just act like little babies and whine about it and just not show up.
See, I
that
think
doesn't solve any issue.
I think it's the obligation of the administration to provide clean locker rooms, gymnasiums, and facilities for the team, and they didn't do that, and it was awful.
I mean, it was unfortunate that the game was missed, for sure. On Sunday, the first BCX standings was released. This coming after arguably the craziest week of college football ever, where 8 teams in the top 25 were upset. The always controversial BCS standings had a few surprises in its first poll. Now, Eric, do you agree with the BCS's top 5?
I agree with 4 out of the 5. I would put Stanford in for Missouri. The reason why, competition and who they've played. Missouri, they played a beat-up Georgia team without its two best running backs, Gurley and Keith Marshall, and then they were without Michael Bennett and Justin Scott Wesley. They're without arguably the 2 best wide receivers at the moment. They had no weapons offensively, and then they played Florida. Yes, they beat them at home without Jeff Driscoll and Matt Jones.
But you got to look at Ohio State then if you factor this in. I agree with the top 3. I think those are pretty set.
Agreed with the
Alabama,
top 3.
Florida State, Oregon, there's not much room to move around.
Right.
But the bottom 2 spots, I'm not going to argue with you about Stanford and Missouri. I think Stanford does right now deserve to be a little bit higher. But Ohio State's resume compared to Missouri and Stanford is nothing.
I would put Ohio State fourth.
Below Missouri.
You would put them below Missouri?
Right now, Missouri has a better resume. They have South Carolina this week. Then they have Tennessee. And they have Texas A&M left. I think they have potential to build a strong resume.
To a degree, they're getting so lucky because Connor Shaw is going to be doubtful for that game. I think they're getting so lucky right now. Stanford, listen to this. They've beaten Arizona State, Washington, and UCLA already. Yes, they lost to Utah, but Utah's put up tough fights against Oregon State. They took them to OT, and they came within a touchdown of beating BYU and UCLA.
But then who has Ohio State beaten? They've beaten Wisconsin and Northwestern. That's it.
Right. Ohio State is undefeated, but it's just, again, the competition and who Missouri has played.
Yeah.
I think Stanford has to be in over them. The Jets and Patriots featured a very controversial ending in which the Pats were called for a penalty that set up a game-winning field goal by the Jets. What do you think of this horrible call, and was it a legitimate penalty?
It was truly, I was really disappointed in the league because I know the Jets, it just came out that they notified the officials about it beforehand. They saw it was happening. But you can't call these penalties when they've never really been called before.
Agreed.
You know, you can't just call this and all of a sudden there's this exception and the kick doesn't work and throws off the whole game. It just doesn't work like that.
And one thing, I watched the replay literally 25 times, and I could not find an instance when contact was made. It has to be discreet and it has to be obvious. Neither happened. It didn't seem like anything happened on that play other than an ordinary field goal block attempt.
Yeah, and I'm not going to argue with the call specifically because they did go and say that according to the rules, even if it wasn't clear to us, they broke the rules. But if you're going to call something, you have to call it consistently.
And you have to make sure exactly. And you have to be sure that it actually happened.
And I'm sure it happens on every play then. It's similar to the holding penalty. I know there's bad holding situations, but the same thing happens. You can't just call things at certain stages. That's a huge point in the game.
And also it was ruled an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty. I think it needs to be obvious, and it needs to be obvious and excessive contact for unsportsmanlike contact penalty or conduct penalty to be called. And it was awful, and it's horrible for the Patriots to lose that way.
Yeah, it's tough because they clearly were the better team throughout the game, and I think it's tough to lose on such a controversial call like that.
It absolutely is.
Yeah. The NBA season starts a week from today. After a hectic summer with some big faces in new places, Eric, who's going to take home the title come June?
A third consecutive seasons, the Miami Heat will be your NBA champions because of the addition of Greg Oden. Listen to these stats.
All right.
The Heat, their weakness last year, rebounding. They're ranked 24th in offensive rebounding percentage and 26th in defensive rebounding percentage. Greg Oden, for his career, has 15.7% offensive rebounding percentage and 25.5% defensive rebounding percentage. Both of those ranks are in the top 5. Yeah. He's an elite rebounder. He's going to help them, even if he gets 20 to 25 minutes.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the only thing they were missing was that piece,
Exactly.
And they were already winning before that piece. So what makes you think? I don't understand how anyone could form an argument against the Miami Heat.
It's going to be very difficult.
I mean, yes, Derrick Rose is back.
Right.
Oklahoma City's a little healthier.
But they couldn't beat them with a healthy Derrick Rose a couple years ago.
And OKC is a little healthier, but as long as the big three are intact and they're close to their prime, obviously Dwayne Wade is starting to wither off with those injuries. Chris Bosh, LeBron James, plus a few pieces, it can't be beat.
If Greg Oden stays healthy, and that's a big if, he's going to help them rebound, and he's going to limit other teams' possessions, and that was a huge problem for the Heat last year, and that's going to be shored up. They have very few weaknesses.
Yeah.
I see them taking home a third consecutive title.
Yeah.
That's all the time we have for on this block. Coming up next, Rajat will be joined by our MLB experts to talk about the best World Series moments and performances. Stay tuned.